I am going to turn the screen over to David Fields and welcome him as moderator to this next session. Mr. Fields is Deputy Commissioner of the Department for Natural Resources, and I will turn the screen over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is David Fields, and I am the Deputy Commissioner of the Department for Natural Resources. It is my honor today to moderate the Supporting Kentucky's Natural Land session of the Governor's Conference on Energy and Environment. We will have 3 speakers from the Energy and Environment Cabinet during this session. The first is Paulette Akers, Director of Kentucky Division of Conservation.
Good morning. My name, as David mentioned, thank you so much, David, is Paulette Akers. I am the Director of the Division of Conservation. Been here about 3.5 years, and it's an ever-changing job. It's really wonderful. I am gonna try and share my screen, but it seems to be a little slow this morning, so if you'll give me a moment. Okay, Lindsay or someone else, can you see my screen?
We can see your screen. Yep, you've got it. Display settings, perfect. You are good to go.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for that. So I have the honor of being the first in this series to talk about preserving Kentucky's natural lands, and the section I work with is the agricultural lands. So today, there's going to be 3 parts to this. I'm going to start with the natural lands, the working portion, and then we are going to move on to forested lands, and then after that, the nature preserves. So any time that we're talking about conservation, specifically soil conservation, we really have to start with this man, Hugh Hammond Bennett. In the 1930s, when there began to be a real problem, particularly out west due to the types of farming that were occurring and a particular drought that year, there was some increased soil erosion. And in 1933, the Soil Erosion Service was created in the Department of the Interior, and Hugh Hammond Bennett was the first director. The Soil Erosion Service is what, the Soil Erosion Service is what has become NRCS. And part of the mission that Mr. Bennett had was to help educate people about soil conservation and talk about the practices they could install that would protect the soil fertility, allow them to grow the best kinds of crops, and also to help provide resources that were needed to the individual farmers and educate school kids. And so it's really been wonderful. The Division of Conservation has worked with so many partners over the years, but it's that push from the dust storms that occurred in the mid-1930s that led to the creation of soil and water conservation districts in every county in Kentucky, and Logan County has 2, so we have 121 soil and water conservation districts. And we also have been doing programs like the Jim Claypool Art and Conservation Writing Competition for the past 75 years to try and educate kids and their parents about soil erosion, water quality, forest health, and wildlife. So Kentucky is really an agricultural state. More than 50% of the land area is used for agriculture. And I know that you'll hear later that my colleague Brandon Howard is going to say it's close to 50% of the state that is covered in forest as well. And the thing is we both fight over some of those lands because most agricultural lands have a section that are forested. Many of them do. particularly Eastern Kentucky. And although we're the horse capital of the world, we actually bring in more money through agriculture in poultry than we do in horse sales and breeding. I really love this infographic from Kentucky Ag in the Classroom. There's a link there at the bottom. If you want to find out more specifics about agriculture in your county, that information is available. But you'll see that there's different types of agriculture as you move across the state. The Cumberland Plateau has lots of forest area, but it also has a pretty fair amount of beef. And there's beef cattle over the state. There's horses in the bluegrass region. And the further west we go, the more we see that there's poultry and eggs. And some of our urban areas have high tunnels. That's a way to do vegetables that is more climate controlled. So we have, and the thing that is a challenge with agriculture is there's no way for a state agency to say that this is the one thing you can do on your farm that will prevent soil erosion and protect water quality specifically for you, because there's different kinds of soil types, different kinds of agriculture, different slopes. There's all sorts of things that play into the individual things that you should do on your farm that are most impactful. So in 1994, the Kentucky legislature passed the Agriculture Water Quality Act. And it says if you have 10 acres or more, crops or critters, anything you're doing where you would be counted as agriculture, then you need to have a plan for what to implement on your farm that will prevent soil erosion and protect water quality. So this plan is available. It's online. We have a paper version, or you're going to get to hear Josiah Fry tomorrow talk about the new Ag Water Quality online tool we have. And there's also state cost share funds through the Kentucky Soil Erosion and Water Quality Cost Share Program that are available to individual farmers through their local conservation district so that they can apply for funds to implement some of these practices. And one of our most popular practices is fencing. Last year, we installed more than 55 miles of fence. These can be used to facilitate rotational grazing, divide a large pasture into smaller pastures that way. They can fence animals out of a forested area or a sinkhole or a pond or a stream or family cemetery. Fence is very popular. It's one of the easiest things to do, although it's not super easy, but it is a very popular practice that you can install that helps prevent soil erosion and protects water. If you're going to install rotational grazing fence, you might need a watering facility. This way you are fencing animals out of the stream. It's preventing them from defecating in the stream, but it provides them clean water, which is healthier for them. You get increased weight gain with freshwater sources like this. We actually installed more than 250 watering facilities in the past year. Here's another great practice. This is a heavy use area. I'm not talking about the barn in the background. What I'm talking about here is the geotextile fabric and rock that occurs in this gateway. Because in Kentucky, the real problem with soil erosion often occurs in the winter and early spring with mud. Because anytime you have churning of soils, then you lose the ability to keep them in place and they wash away. So heavy use areas like this rock gateway, you saw one around the watering facility, those are great ways to prevent mud and keep your soil where it should be. And we actually paid for 763,000 square foot of heavy use areas in the past year. Not all of these projects are just for livestock. We also do lots of cropland projects. Here on your left is a grade stabilization structure, sometimes called a gully plug, and it's a way to slow water down that's coming down gradient through a field and cutting a big gully. You can actually put in a weir or something on the lower a portion of that to stop the rock from degrading and put some rock and slow the water, and that prevents you from losing all your topsoil in the gully. Another great practice is cover crops. We paid for almost 4,000 acres of cover crops last year. And that's the green grass that you see growing between where they have harvested the corn prior. Both of these practices are really often occurring on croplands, but the grade stabilization structure is something that could also be installed in a pasture. And we wouldn't be able to do any of this without all of our partners. We have lots of partners inside the agency, like Division of Forestry, Division of Water, Waste Management, all of the other agencies within the Energy and Environment Cabinet. We work every day with the soil and water conservation districts in the state, with our partners at USDA, NRCS, and FSA, with the land grants, with commodity groups, all sorts of people. They help us do the education that's necessary to prevent soil erosion, protect water quality throughout the state, and to provide that technical assistance to farmers all over the state to do the things that are best for their land. So if you have any interest in any of those different types of practices or in the new ag water quality planning tool, we would be happy to answer any questions. You can feel free to email me at paulette.akers@ky.gov, or our web page is available through the eec.ky.gov page. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and I'll be around at the end to answer any questions.
Thank you, Paulette. Up next is Brandon Howard. Brandon is the director of the Kentucky Division of Forestry.
All right, thank you, David. Let's see here. Let me share my screen. Let's see. All right, can you all see my presentation?
It looks great. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you, David, for that introduction. So I am Brandon Howard. I'm the director and state forester for the Kentucky Division of Forestry. And our mission is to protect, conserve, and enhance the forest resources of the Commonwealth. All right, just a little bit about my background. I have a degree from the University of Kentucky. It's a Bachelor of Science degree in forestry. I have a 17-year career, all with the Kentucky Division of Forestry. I spent 11 years in Southeast Kentucky in the mountains as a forest inventory and analysis forester and forester for Kentucky Ridge and Continuous State Forests. Most recently, in the last 6 years, I've spent my time at our headquarters office here in Frankfort. I've served as a state forest supervisor, forest protection branch manager, and most currently as director. So not only am I director of the Division of Forestry, but I'm also Kentucky's state forester. So what that means is I get an opportunity to represent Kentucky's forest interest on a national scale. We're part of the National Association of State Foresters, which is comprised of the directors of all forestry agencies in all 50 states and U.S. territories. So within the NASF, I have the honor of serving on the Wildland Fire Committee, and I am the NASF liaison to the National Association of Conservation Districts and Cooperative Extension. All right, a little bit about the Division of Forestry. The title of this group conversation today is Supporting Kentucky's Natural Lands, and our agency has been doing that for 109 years, since 1912. We have many programs that and different things that we do to help the forest in many ways, as you can see listed here, from forest management and forest protection. But I won't hit all of them today, but I'll hit several of them. So we're going to do a brief overview today of what we do with forest stewardship and how we assist in that area. along with our state forests, our public lands, our tree nurseries, our fire management program, the Kentucky Master Logger Program, forest health, and timber harvest compliance. All right, the forest stewardship program. My colleague Paulette mentioned that agriculture makes up 50% or so of the state's land mass. Well, she was right. I was going to mention that the forested acreage in Kentucky is close to 50%. We're not quite there, but fairly close. With that, 88% of the forested land in Kentucky is privately owned. So this is a good opportunity for the Division of Forestry to reach out to landowners to try to make a positive impact early in a landowner's decision-making process. So what we do is we'll meet with the landowner, and one of the first things that we do is we try to establish the landowner's objective. We want to know what the landowner wants to get out of their forest and what they expect to see as an end result. So from there, we'll conduct a forest inventory, and that'll follow with a statistical analysis, and then we'll have a complete report detailing our findings. And once we do that, we'll meet with the landowner to discuss those findings, and the information that we'll include in that report could be species composition, and that's just what kind of trees are on the landscape, the density of those trees, how thick they are across the landscape, the size of the trees, an average size, and an estimated volume of timber. So for many landowners, this serves as an introduction to their forest. So like I said at the beginning of this slide, it's a good opportunity for us to make a positive impact on the forest landscape in Kentucky. Next, the Division of Forestry, we operate 2 bare root seedling tree nurseries in the state, one in the eastern part of the state in Morgan County, and then in the western part in Marshall County, and that's the John P. Rohde Nursery. There we produce 1.2 million seedlings per year, and the consumers of these seedlings vary in size, some from very large reforestation efforts in western Kentucky to some small scale farm enhancements. Sometimes landowners would like to enhance wildlife, and we offer tree seedlings to accomplish those goals. Another big partner, and as Paulette mentioned, she had a large list of partnerships. I didn't have a slide. I don't have a slide to show all the partnerships just because I didn't want to leave anyone out. But as you see, the theme during my talk today is going to be partnerships. And one of those is our conservation districts. The Division of Forestry has a matching program with our conservation districts. And last year alone, they purchased 80,000 seedlings here in the state, and gave passed out tree seedlings at tree giveaways to encourage forestation efforts. So we appreciate the conservation districts greatly. All right, another program within the Division of Forestry is our forest health program. Here we monitor and sample for emerging forest health issues. There's multiple partners on the federal, state, and local level here, and we're thankful for all of them. You know who you are. One of our goals of what we do is we pass along information about forest health threats to landowners. And what this does is this helps landowners decide optimal timber harvest times. For one, if you have the emerald ash borer coming in and you know it's going to decimate your white ash and green ash populations on your forested land, you may want to think about having a preemptive harvest. So that gives us the opportunity to advise landowners of that option. Also, we advise landowners of mitigation measures that might be available. Sometimes they can treat their trees to in a variety of fashions to try to slow or prevent the pests from taking hold. Some notable issues from the past that we still have current with us are the emerald ash borer. You can see the green insect on the bottom right of your screen. Those of you in eastern and Central Kentucky, you're well aware of the emerald ash borer and what it did to the green ash and white ash population of our state. And you can see a map on the lower left-hand side there that shows the emerald ash borer infested counties. So those of you joining us from Western Kentucky, be on the lookout. It's heading your way quite rapidly. A new threat we're monitoring with our partners is the laurel wilt disease. As you can see on the top right of the screen, it's coming up from the southwest. It's affecting our sassafras trees, so that's something we're kind of trying to keep an eye on. There's still some threats outside our borders, but we're still monitoring, such as the spotted lanternfly, the gypsy moth, and thousand cankers disease. All right, I want to talk briefly about our fire management program. We have the duty to protect the Commonwealth's resources from wildfire. That's forest resources, infrastructure. We try to keep wildfires from reaching infrastructure. And so we take that responsibility seriously, and we're currently in our fall fire season, which began on October 1st. We do try to mitigate the threat of wildfire through prescribed fire applications. And mostly the Division of Forestry focuses on hazardous fuel reduction. That's where we will use a prescribed fire to lower leaf litter fuel loads and down woody debris fuel loads to try to prevent those catastrophic fires where we can. When the weather, these prescribed fires we apply when the weather is right, where the fire will be low to moderate intensity. Often during a wildfire, we'll see catastrophic intensities to where stand structure is changed in the forest, and our prescribed fire efforts are meant to try to reduce that. But the beauty of prescribed fire is it's multifaceted. One facet is the ecological restoration, and we partner with the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves. Sunni Carr, our colleague, will be talking next. She's going to go further into those efforts and what they do, but we like to partner with them and try to bolster their efforts and work as a team. And we appreciate what they do. Not only is the Office of Nature Preserves our partner in prescribed fire, we also partner with the Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources, Daniel Boone National Forest, and many other federal and state government agencies, as well as non-government organizations. I want to point out here, I did mention some partners, but the list is vast. Our prescribed fire partners and the Kentucky Prescribed Fire Council is also a large partner, and we appreciate them. And I did want to point out that soil erosion potential can often be reduced if we try to prevent those catastrophic wildfires that remove all the trees and all the forest leaf litter. Then if we can prevent it from getting to the catastrophic stage, then we can also lower soil erosion. All right, our state forest in the state. That's our public lands arm within the Division of Forestry. Our main purpose of our state forests are to serve as a demonstration of proper forest management, and this is for private landowner educational opportunities. But all impacts of the division's programs can be experienced from our state forest. So we're very proud of those state forests. We have 10 state forests throughout the Commonwealth, totaling nearly 49,000 acres, with our oldest state forest being Continia in Harlan County in southeast Kentucky, in which we acquired that property in 1919. And our largest state forest is Kentucky Ridge at over 15,000 acres, and that's in Bell County. All right, our timber harvest compliance program. This is where we inspect known timber harvests. The purpose is to enforce best management practices for timber harvest, and this is designed to reduce sedimentation in streams as a result of timber harvest. One thing we do besides enforcement is we have a large prominent education program in the Kentucky Master Logger program, and I can't thank our partners in that program enough. The University of Kentucky, College of Agriculture, Department of Forestry, and the Kentucky Forest Industries Association. Together, we offer many classes throughout the year for loggers who want to get in, folks who want to begin logging and obtain their master logger certification, and also for those who seek continuing education courses to continue logging in the state. So let's see. So next, I did want to kind of touch on the forest industry in Kentucky. I did want to mention this week is actually Forest Products Week. So as you can see on the right of the screen, the governor signed a proclamation identifying October 13th through 23rd as Forest Products Week. So we're thankful for that. The forest products industry has a total economic benefit of $13 to $14 billion across our state. And you know, I want to point out that the forest industry begins in the forest with the landowner. And like I said earlier, that's who we start off early trying to discuss their goals and try to move them in a positive direction. If we have good timber forest resources early on, then at the end of the game, we'll have a good timber resources. And then, like all other facets of our agency, we have partnerships. The forest industry, we have federal, state, private industry, and nonprofit organizations that really help us in the forest industry, and we're a part of many. And so we're thankful for all the partnerships and what everybody does to make this portion of our economy move forward. And as you can see at the bottom of the screen, this map here, all the dots, the blue, yellow, and red dots, those represent forest industry facilities across the state. As you can see, it impacts nearly every county of the state and is not limited to only Eastern Kentucky. There are many facilities in Central and Western Kentucky. All right, I'm going to wrap up with the idea that this is a long-term renewable cycle. Our forest landscape and the Division of Forestry has been supporting Kentucky's natural lands through each step of the process, and we continue to do so. From the left of the screen of the seedling, as you move clockwise to the forester with the landowner, and then to the top of the screen with our public outreach on our state forest, to our wildfire and prescribed fire management, to our working with loggers in the timber harvesting process, all the way around the bottom to the forest utilization portion. And then we're back to our seedling nurseries, where a landowner can decide whether they want to plant the trees or they can just, there's some options for natural regeneration as well. So with that, I thank you for this opportunity, and I'll be here if there's any questions at the end of the panel.
Thank you, Brandon. Up next, we have Executive Director Sunni Carr from the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves.
Good morning. I'm trying to get this going here. All right. One second. There we go. Can you guys see my screen now?
Yes, it looks wonderful. Thank you.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for your patience as we're working through the technology. That's always fun doing presentations this way, but we're so glad that we can be here for you this morning and share some of what we do in our individual offices. And thank you, Brandon and Paulette, for your presentations. That folds in nicely to what I'll talk about this morning. And the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves may or may not be as familiar to you as some of the other divisions within the cabinet. So I'd like to take this morning, I'll introduce myself and just talk about what we do in land management and how we fit in. And again, my name is Sunni Carr, and I'm the Executive Director here at the OKNP. And my background I put on here because I recently came over to this office, but it's really been a pleasure. And I spent a long career at Kentucky Fish and Wildlife, and I've been able to bring a lot of land management experience here to the office and have worked with them in concert for several years. One of the things that I like to do, because people in the Commonwealth really need to know what a gem that they have in the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves. And what we do is we have recently changed over some duties, and that was actually back in 2016. And so I like to share those with our public, and I'm going to run through them really quick, and that will give some framework to the land management that we do. But this is all outlined in statute. We secure a system of state nature preserves for present and future generations. We like to promote scientific and spiritual values of what we consider a, quote, an unspoiled natural environment. We recognize, conserve, and restore rare and endangered plants throughout the state. When you think about botany, people automatically think of the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves. We have those specialists here, as well as some zoologist staff. Now, we also provide a clearinghouse of information on the environment, plants, and animals. And as we talk about land management and we talk about energy development, these are critical pieces of the puzzle. When we go to think about where are the best places to site projects and what benefits are these going to have for the Commonwealth, we also provide the service of letting folks know these are things you need to be aware of. Here are some plants or some animals that are going to be of concern, and we can help point them in the right direction to other land management agencies, to resource agencies that can help design those in the best way possible. In 2016, there were some changes. It used to be the Kentucky Nature Preserves Commission. Now it is the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves. And in 2016, there were some changes made that were fundamental. Into the office came the Kentucky Wild River Program. And that is a program that is designed to protect some of our wild river corridors. And these are for ecological and recreational purposes. And then also, coming into the fold was the Kentucky Heritage Land Conservation Fund. And if you're familiar with the nature plates, that funding that you pay with those plates comes in to help support this. And there are many partners within the HLCF, and they meet together, they have a board, and those monies are gone across the state to purchase lands and also to manage those lands. So here we go back into the land management theme. But those are some major areas of our office. Now, I like to back up and let people kind of get themselves in the right mindset. And I'm born and raised in Kentucky, and I love the state. And throughout my career, I have gained a greater appreciation of just how rich our state is in terms of biodiversity. From east to west, we have species that occur nowhere else in the world. We've got the Kentucky cave shrimp in the Mammoth Cave area, white-haired goldenrod, which is in the eastern part of the state, Orconectes jeffersoni, which is actually a crayfish in Jefferson County that was described in scientific literature only a year ago by a colleague. So we have species in the state that haven't even been described yet, and we know that. So we don't know everything about our state, but we do know that there's a lot of opportunity out there. And also the Kentucky clover. Maybe you've not even heard of Kentucky clover, but it occurs in a very small area. It actually was recently extirpated, not extinct, but extirpated, meaning it doesn't occur in the state. But the biologists here were able to secure plant material, work with partners, and propagate that. And actually today they're going back to put some of this back out on the landscape where it was originally found. So we're going to help propagate that and make sure that that plant is here for the long term. And as we think about our state moving from east to west, you think about the Appalachians and you think about the plants and the animals that occur there. Those resemble things that you might find in the northeastern United States. You move to the central part of the state, you're going to see that those areas are very rich. You've got the interior low plateaus. You have areas that were prairie remnants. We have glades. We have karst topography. And then you move westward and you get into more of what we might consider the East Gulf coastal plain or the big rivers areas. And those corridors and those plants and animals, again, that are unique to those systems really present a lot of opportunity, but a lot of challenge. And land management is absolutely the key to maintaining this ecological heritage. So why do we do land management? What is land management? And where do we conduct this? Well, why do we do land management? We have intrinsic reasons. Looking forward, we want to ensure that our natural heritage, excuse me, is protected and persists for future generations. We think about our children and our grandchildren. We want to make sure that we've got the best place that is available for them moving forward. Clean water, healthy forest, and ecological systems that are intact. That's what our agency thinks about, and that's what we strive to help do. What are some of the tools that we use for land management? Well, that's a big toolbox, and I've listed a few here. Brandon and Paulette have mentioned things that in their divisions that they work with. Paulette with farming, we're very concerned about soil erosion. We want to protect that resource so they can work with private landowners and they can do things that are going to help stop or prevent erosion, types of grassland filter strips. There's fencing. There's ways to control that sedimentation. In forestry, forest health, composition, making sure that that resource is there long term is great. And in the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves, we kind of roll a lot of different things in together because we do work in a lot of very sensitive areas. We have some areas that we do a little bit of management on, and we can bring those back pretty quickly. We have other areas that require more of a long-term touch. Some tools that we can use. I've got thinning. Well, what is that? If you have an area that was previously harvested for forestry activities, they may or may not have gone back in and done some land management, or it could be an area that had been open at some point and had been abandoned. Things grow up, so there's not always the species in there that are best for that system. So we can go in and thin some of those trees out. It could be maples or something else that are less desirable for that system. Chemical treatment, that's a big one. The slide in the center there, you can see that is not what we want. We have a lot of issues with invasive and exotic species. Those are very expensive and difficult to control, whether you're dealing with plants or you're dealing with animals or insects that are exotic and invasive. They really can make things difficult for management and can be very costly to the Commonwealth and its public. Fire, Brandon mentioned fire. We are big fans of fire here in the office, as folks know. When we talk about fire, it is what Brandon talked about in terms of prescribed fire. These are very controlled situations. It is a prescription. We have staff who are highly trained to go out and to conduct a fire event to get the desired ecological outcome. And what we see is whether you are in far eastern Kentucky at the top of Pine Mountain, or you're all the way in western Kentucky in those far western states, fire has had a major role across our landscape, whether that was from human fires where they used it to control vegetation or to drive wildlife in hunting, or it was a fire event from lightning. We know that fire has been a big player on our landscape because we can look at the plant community and those plants tell us what has happened there historically. When we look at the seed bank, when we go in and we work in areas, fire tells us what has happened. We can apply fire to a landscape and we can look at the plant community that comes back and we get a very good idea on how we need to continue managing that property. There are insects that depend on plants that are fire dependent. It's all a circle. So we do a lot of fire all across the state. And then planting. The picture on the far right, there are some folks that are planting trees. It's a little difficult to see because of the sunlight, but sometimes we go in and we actually do plant trees back, and we even, in some cases like today with the Kentucky clover, we plant herbaceous plants back. It could be native grasses, it could be some special forbs or legumes. So we do a lot of different techniques in land management. It just depends on what is appropriate for the site. So we also mentioned, where do we conduct land management? Well, if you look at our state again from east to west, the topography is different, the soils are different. You look at the river systems that traverse our state, and we have so much opportunity. There is not a one size fits all for land management. We go out to each site and we assess what's there, what should be there, and what could be there. And we write management plans accordingly. And just to give you an idea on how much we're talking about and how much we impact and work with our partners on, excuse me, within 9 wild river corridors, I mentioned the Wild River Program in the beginning, 27,000 acres are impacted by our management and conservation actions. Nature preserves alone, those properties that are held in trust with our office, 28,000 acres there. Now, I also mentioned the Heritage Land Conservation Fund. Those properties may be held by one of our partners. It could be a county government, it could be Fish and Wildlife, it could be Forestry. There's a whole host of partners within that program. And there are 85,000 acres over 85 properties. So all total, the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves helps influence land management directly or indirectly on over 140,000 acres of property across the state. And when you look at this map that I have up here, and you think about areas that you're familiar with, you think about how things have changed maybe in the last 10 to 20 years, just where you live, on your drive home from work. Land management is always changing. It's very dynamic. There's not one solution that fits all the time. So we have to be very adaptable. How do we do this? Obviously, we have a small staff, even when we're fully staffed with lots of technicians during certain times of the year, we're talking less than 25. And partnerships are key. Brandon mentioned partnerships earlier. We work with state partners, we work with federal partners and non-governmental partners. We have Division of Conservation, the Division of Forestry, water, state parks, fish and wildlife, and county governments. Now on the federal side, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, obviously that's a big one, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And I like to remind people that we work with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. There are water drawdown and different things that impact critical rare animals in those water systems. We can work with them on their release schedules, and we can help make sure that those animals have the opportunity to reproduce because they're dependent on the quantity and the temperature of water. We also work with the Department of Defense. Think about our state. Think about the land management opportunities where you have Fort Knox and Fort Campbell and the Bluegrass Army Depot. Those areas all are large land masses. They all have land management programs associated, and we like to work with those staff and help them identify rare communities that we can help them manage on through prescription or actually lending a hand in the field where appropriate. But those really do harbor some interesting plant and animal communities. So we like to be good partners with them. And then non-governmental partners, Nature Conservancy, the Kentucky Waterways Alliance, the Kentucky Lands Trust, just to name a few. Certainly I've left a lot out, but those are some of the highlights. And then finally, as the foundation in our state, Paulette and Brandon both have talked about how important our private landowners are. And even though our office, we focus a lot on those properties that are in some type of governmental ownership or protection, we do work with private landowners because a lot of very rare plant and animals don't recognize boundaries. They don't recognize, oh, I'm on a preserve, I want to live here. We work with private landowners to identify unique things on their properties. We might help them set up as a registered natural area or something of that nature, but we'll go back and visit, we'll monitor, we'll work with them so that they understand the resource that they have and how important it is, excuse me, that they manage appropriately, and we try to help them with that process. So as we move forward with energy and conversations about how we use our landscape, there are so many opportunities to work together, to think about, you know, solar's come up a couple of times, and what an amazing opportunity. It's very important to work with each other on the front end. So we recognize places where, one, there might be a sensitive resource there, or, hey, how can we use this opportunity and the land management around it to make things best for our needs for energy, but also for ecological benefits. And there are untapped opportunities there that we haven't even begun to investigate yet. So it's an exciting time. Our office has a lot of responsibility, and we've got some of the best staff going, and we're really proud of the work that they do in land management. And with that, I'll stop and turn it back over. Thank you so much.
Thank you to all of the distinguished panelists and to Commissioner Fields for this very informative session. I want to especially thank Paulette Akers, Director of the Division of Conservation, for explaining how education is key to managing our health and wildlife. And I have to say that the Agriculture Across Kentucky map was indeed a picture worth 1,000 words. I'm glad to know that that is out there. And thank you to Brandon Howard, the Director for the Division of Forestry, for highlighting Kentucky's initiatives to protect and preserve our forests. And finally, thank you to Sunni Carr, the Director of the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves, for showing us the importance of understanding Kentucky's rich biodiversity and for the many tools for land management. I will turn the screen back over to Commissioner Howard for final remarks before we proceed. I think maybe now is a good time to remind the attendees that you can submit questions through the Q&A panel to any of the panelists that have just spoken. And if we don't get a chance to get to all of the questions before this session concludes, we certainly will post all of your questions with answers on the website, the conference website, and you can catch up with all the answers on the website.
I was actually texted a question. This is for Brandon. I'm curious what landowners can do to remedy or fight forest infestation and fight kudzu.
Well, thanks for the question. Kudzu is a difficult plant pest to fight. There's a variety of chemical methods that can be used. I think the best thing for the particular individual to do would be to reach out to their local forestry field office. There could be, you almost have to be on the site to see the severity of the issue to make a prescription, a determination of what needs to be, do you want to apply a chemical, and what kind of chemical? Because there's a variety of chemicals that'll work, but some chemicals will last longer and persist and help control the kudzu, but the chemical method may not need to be used. So what I would recommend that individual to do would be to go to the our cabinet's website, eec.ky.gov, follow through Natural Resources and then the Division of Forestry, and then locate one of our field offices, whichever one's closest. We have 6 field offices statewide, and they can get in touch with a forester, and a forester could come out and give them some specific advice to their particular situation.
Since we currently do not have any questions in the queue, here's a question for the panelists. What is the greatest challenge facing Kentucky's natural lands from your perspective?
Well, I can start off. I think that there's a lot of different factors that are affecting our natural lands and threaten our natural lands. One that stands out in my mind is the forest health issues from invasive exotic species coming into our state, and it's not only forested land, but that's what I focus on, so I'll speak on that. But you get an insect that comes in and they have full reign. They can take out whatever, like emerald ash borer, green ash and white ash trees are on their menu, and there's nobody to stop them, and they move very fast, and they decimated some of our forests that had that species as their primary component. And so when you do that, you completely change the stand structure, and ecologically it's a disaster. And the forest is resilient. It'll come back, but it takes a long time. And the bad thing is it's not just that pest. There's more pests knocking on our door. So we try to do a good job of keeping an eye on those pests and letting the public know. Some pests have more options of controlling. Emerald ash borer is just an example of one it's possible to control.
I would say that it's really the competing land use, that we only have so much land, and that there's the pressures to expand cities, so build out away from the cities. And if you do that, then it's most often taking up agricultural lands or forested lands. And so I really love the brownfields program through Waste Management, because that's a way to preserve those ag lands around the cities and redevelop within the city. So I think that's really a critical importance right now is the balance of land use.
Well, and I would have to agree with Paulette. And Brandon, I agree with you too in terms of things that we don't anticipate. Those, you know, we have a plan for management and we move forward, and then we have some type of an exotic pest or something that comes in, or a disease issue that really, you know, garners our attention. But to Paulette's point, I think you're right. And, you know, I had mentioned earlier about planning and opportunities to work together on the front end. So many times in conservation efforts, whether it be through forestry or agriculture or with natural systems, it seems like we're kind of playing catch up and trying to fix some things, you know, as we talk about downhill, that calf's out of the barn, you know, and so it's easier. And I think I'm seeing some really positive changes. Land use planning is really important, because you're right, Paulette, as more pressure comes, and it's not just in urban areas, but you know, areas that we thought would be rural in our state for a long time to come are now starting to see pressures that they may not have anticipated 30 years ago. And so, you know, in my world, in terms of more natural areas, it definitely has an impact. Folks don't have the connection sometimes with the outdoors, whether it be through agriculture or just, you know, forestry. You know, how many parents take their kids out now and teach them trees? You know, those were things when I was young. I had the good opportunity to grow up on a farm, but a lot of our youth and our public are so far removed from natural resources at times, it's difficult for them to make the connections between certain land use practices and clean water, or why is this bug bad in a forest, or why would you cut a tree? You know, messages that we've been taught and shared throughout society. Sometimes it's difficult to get people to understand the issues so that we can move forward. And so I think that, you know, the efforts that are going in now, especially with the infrastructure bill and other things, looking at how we address land use planning, and recognize that there are all these multifaceted pressures, that really seems to be key, because you can't always put a subdivision next door to a, you know, a sensitive natural area and not expect to get some type of negative impacts to that resource. And there's some things that we can't just put a fence around, or we just can't have an easy fix for. And those are things in a conservation community, and helping our local communities with planning, that we can help give them an area that the quality of life for their constituents and their public is what they want. And sometimes they just don't know. So the education portions, and then the land use planning and assistance on the front end, I think is somewhere that is a challenge, but also probably one of our greatest opportunities in the Commonwealth.
Our next question is for Division of Forestry, but Sunni, you may also have some input on this as well, is how do goats or other animals, how beneficial are they to eradicating invasive plants, and are there any negative side effects where they may affect protected species?
Well, I'll let Sunny talk about the protected species, but I'll address the forest health or the forest component portion of it. I think animals such as that can do a good job of reducing the invasive species, but really it goes back to what the landowner's objectives are. What's their desired outcome, and that's what we'll ask the landowner. If they want to have a natural forest component is their final goal, then they may run some of those animals through for a time period, but at some point they'll have to remove those animals, because the natural regeneration from the existing tree canopy, what's already there, those animals are going to eat the native species just like they eat the invasive species. So it's fine on the front end, but at some point they're probably going to have to, from a forestry standpoint, they're going to have to back off and then monitor, because those invasives will still persist in the seed bank and you'll probably have to follow up with some various chemical treatments or timber stand improvement. But it all comes down to what the landowner's objectives are. And at the end of the day, they'd like to see a wide open forest with nothing but tree canopy and nothing in the forest floor. Then that would be the route to go.
Yeah, as far as the sensitive species, obviously that's going to be very site dependent. Certainly goats aren't really going to discriminate against something we don't want munched on versus what we do. So that would have to have a lot of surgical look applied to it.
Okay, our next question is, are natural trust or deed restriction protected? What does that mean with economic development, and does a deed restriction protect against and preserve the property?
Yes, that's a very good question. That is the intent of the easements and the protections that our office can provide. And those are voluntary agreements. Now, if there are properties that are purchased with the Heritage Lands funds and those public sources, that's one of the objectives, is to provide that long-term protection. You know, there's challenges that come along. That's not for me to decide. That's the legal system, but thus far those have held up. And the goal is to provide protection. And this goes back to some of the planning. The goal is not to impede economic development, but again, that goes back to quality of life in our communities and what we want. I haven't really ever heard anybody complain that they had a nice park in their community that they could take their family to. A lot of people see that as a positive, and it helps home values and different things. So there's a lot of facets to economic development outside of just industrial or commercial development or building. So I think there's room for both on our landscape. And yes, those tools do provide protections.
Well, Eileen, that is all the time we have for our questions, so I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, thank you very much. And a final thank you to all of the panelists here today for really explaining to us how Kentucky is supporting its natural lands. We will now take a 15-minute break, and we'll resume at 10:30. And a reminder before we depart that questions that have not been that we've run out of time to answer will be made available after the conference with the appropriate answers. So be sure to check out the website for that. I will see everyone, or not see, but I will hear everyone at 10:15. Thank you. I stand corrected. I will be back at 10:30.